Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar for evaluation planning for corporate grantees. I am Shanta Jackson, your facilitator for today, and this is brought to you by Cause Engagement Associates. And today, our learning objectives include we want you all to walk away with understanding how to align evaluation activities with funder expectations. We want you all to become familiar with the common types and uses of evaluation, understand quantitative and qualitative data collection methods, and learn how to plan and structure an effective evaluation. And before we get started, I'll tell you a little bit about Cause Engagement Associates. We were established in 2015. We are a national consulting firm based in Maryland, and everything that we do is socially conscious. Our services include strategic development, program planning and execution, community and stakeholder engagement, assessment and evaluation that includes community health needs assessments, and dissemination to help you all share your lessons learned and to promote your socially conscious initiatives. You can always learn more about us at causeengagement.com or send us an email at info@causeengagement.com. Our team consists of strategic thinkers who are not afraid to challenge traditional methods and ideologies when it comes to being socially conscious and being responsible for helping our clients to improve the lives of others. And these are what you see on the screen now are our key team members. Focusing on various areas of subject matter expertise as it relates to, we have research and evaluation, we have mental health, public health education, strategic planning, we have community health and Latino engagement, and then also LGBTQ plus and health equity advocacy expertise, as well as Indigenous and tribal engagement expertise on our team. All right. And so for our first learning objective, understand how to align evaluation activities with funder expectations. And so it's very important for me to make sure that you all understand the importance of institutional alignment. And this matters because you want to make sure that you align your evaluation activities with funder expectations to ensure that your results resonate with not only your organization, but also with your corporate foundation, with your partner, which is a partner to you, with their priorities. And this increases the likelihood of future engagement and future collaboration and funding opportunities as well. And so some of the key benefits as it relates to that alignment are this strengthens your partnerships with your funders. This demonstrates accountability and transparency on your end, and it highlights the shared impact between your program and the foundation's mission. And especially now with a lot of the changes that are coming down the pipeline from the federal level or just private interest groups or even public interest groups, a lot of organizations feel that they're under pressure to maybe change the way they work, how they describe the individuals that they serve and your work. And I would still challenge everyone to be very intentional and to honor your organization's missions and your values. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you understand the funder's expectations. And so in doing that, you want to make sure that you familiarize yourself with your corporate foundation's mission, values, and focus areas. You want to, as best as possible, so this is pre-award and post-award, some of these activities, you want to identify the metrics or outcomes that they prioritize. For example, it could be community engagement or health improvement or environmental impact. And communication is key. So you want to always make sure that you engage in open dialogue with funders to clarify their expectations and success metrics. And you want to use this as an opportunity to align on goals and create a shared understanding of of your evaluation framework and expectations. And a really good question for you to ask on your end for your organization is how do you define success and impact? And then also having that clear understanding of how the funder defines success and impact. And is it just numbers? And so, and if it is just numbers, that doesn't mean that you still don't go through with the proper evaluation planning, because your evaluation planning is a part of your program planning. It's a part of your storytelling, your dissemination, you sharing impact. And it also creates opportunities for future investment and or for future opportunities as it relates to grants, fundraising, et cetera. So you don't want to cut yourself short either. And you also want to make sure, as it relates to communication, is incorporate regular check-ins with your funder to ensure that to ensure your shared progress. And it's okay to refine goals as needed when you have that regular communication, because things change. All right. And we also want you to determine the best way to balance your program and community needs. Um, Focus on, and in doing that, you want to focus on dual impact. So while meeting your funder expectations, ensure your evaluation, as I mentioned earlier, also reflects the needs of your organization, the needs of your community, or communities that you serve, and just the priorities of your organization. And you want to highlight outcomes that demonstrate how the program benefits the community, and also how it aligns with your funder's priorities as well. And you also want to make sure that you're being very transparent, and you're discussing realistic expectations with your funder, especially if certain metrics may be challenging to achieve, or if there are certain community constraints. All right. And so that was our discussion on understanding how to align evaluation activities with funder expectations. And next we'll move on to help you all to understand or become better or become familiar with common types and uses of evaluation. Okay, so there are 5 types of common evaluations that I'll share with you. So we have formative, summative, process, outcome, and impact evaluation, and I'll explain each. All right. And so in the column, I'm looking at formative. So formative evaluation, think of this more so at the beginning. So formative is when you're starting a new program. And formative evaluation, it assists you early on in the early phases of the program to help you to make decisions. So so your formative evaluation, you're evaluating a program during development. And so this could be, for example, a pilot project, or so this means that you're engaging your evaluation team, whether internal or external, at the beginning. And so formative is, this is our process thus far. This is what we've done. We've seen as a result of these activities, these are some preliminary outcomes, or this is very promising. We thought that we should implement the program this way, and we thought that these should be our recruitment efforts, and but we need to make some changes, or this is perfect, we're going to continue that way. Or it could be our assessment, our pre-assessment, or some of our survey tools need to be tweaked based off of the implementation that we've done thus far. So that's your formative evaluation. Now, summative is more so kind of at the end. So end could be it could be, let's say you have a 6-month grant, 9 months, 12 month. It could be, at the end of whatever or it could be by phases. Let's say you have a multi-year grant, it's 5 years or it's 2 years. It could be at the end of those phases, or end of year 1, end of year 2. But usually with summative, and even if the funding has ended with one particular funder, that doesn't necessarily, because we want you all to focus on sustainability, and the purpose of evaluation is to help you to get towards sustainability beyond the funding of your current funder. But with the summative evaluation, this can help you to determine and even help the funder to determine whether or not they want to continue with the program or end it or continue funding. And it helps you to determine whether your program should be expanded to other locations. And this provides information on program effectiveness. And again, it's completed after the completion of the program design. All right, so you have your formative and summative evaluation. But in your formative and summative evaluation, what exactly is it that you're evaluating? Are you evaluating process, outcome, impact? Okay, and so with process evaluation, process helps you to determine why an established program has changed over time. Your process evaluation helps you to address inefficiencies in your program delivery or services. And so with processes, this is what we intended to do. These were the strategies that we planned for, and this is what we actually implemented. So process focuses on the actual program implementation. So it's what we did, how many, just really more so just the activities. You're not focusing on, as a result of us doing these activities, these were the outcomes. It's just process only. So sometimes with funders, and that's what they're looking for. And that's where it's how many did you serve? How many workshops or how many gardens did you plant, or how many stakeholders did you engage, or what types of activities did you do? That's more so your process. Now, as it relates to outcome, outcome evaluation is as a result of us implementing these activities, these are the changes that we have. So we have changes in, so we're assessing changes in, it could be knowledge, attitude, behavior, self-efficacy. And this is all as a result of your program implementation or the practices that you've actually implemented. And with your outcome evaluation, just like with the others, you kind of determine, are we going to continue this? But you're going to decide whether or not your program activities actually affected your participants. As a result of your activities, what were the outcomes? And if it's planned well, as a result of our activities, we can say that this was the change because of our activities, or maybe there was some outside influence, and you can include that as well. But you're more so focusing on your activities. And your outcome evaluation helps to establish and measure clear benefits of the program. And as it relates to impact, I want you all to think long-term. As it relates to corporate funders, it's not a research study. It's not a federally funded project to where impact, if you think about, I want to apply this to your mission and vision statement with your organization. So impact is more so related to your vision. So your process and your outcome, that's your mission. But in a perfect world, our vision is to end childhood hunger, for example, right? And so sometimes with your impact, when you're planning it, with your evaluation or your program planning, it doesn't necessarily have to be measured during your award period, if that makes sense to you all. You're showing your funder and your other stakeholders what it is that they're investing in. And as a result of these activities over the long term, this is what we hope our impact to be. But it doesn't mean that you have to be responsible necessarily for measuring that impact. However, impact could also be that storytelling aspect or the qualitative, which I'll talk more about. But you could an example would be collecting information on those life-touching or life-changing moments as a result of your program. So that's another way to demonstrate impact, not thinking like more long-term research scientific processes. And usually when you conduct your impact evaluation, that's when you're looking to influence usually some type of policy and practices, of course, of fundraising, future fundraising as well. And again, this is usually long term. And when it comes to your outcomes, you can have, and I'll talk about this when I talk about logic models, you can have your short term, intermediate, and long term outcomes. And again, that open communication with your funder is important for you all to determine, the expectations for this particular award or this particular award period. And so with that said, these are the common types of evaluation. We have formative, beginning, summative, end, process, focuses on program implementation. This is what you said you were going to do. What did you actually do? Outcome focuses on the actual effect to your program participants or to the individuals that you serve. And again, your impact focuses on long-term sustained changes as a result of your program activities. All right. And the key recommendation from our team is that if you conduct an outcome evaluation, you also want to implement a process evaluation. And the reason why is because less desirable outcomes may be due to your process. It may be due to your actual program implementation. There may be issues there. So if you're going to do an outcome, so you always want to, at minimum, do a process evaluation. But it's not, in my opinion, I don't think it's an either or. If you're doing outcome, you should also be doing process as well. And as it relates to evaluation planning, if you don't have a well-designed and executed program, it will be reflected in your evaluation. And it's best to engage your stakeholders and your evaluation team from the beginning, but you have to define who stakeholders are. So if you're working with community, for example, I don't like to differentiate and say stakeholders and community members. I actually consider your community members your stakeholders as well, or the individuals that you serve. And stakeholders could be internal, it could be your board, of course. Stakeholders in this, and for the purpose of this discussion, will also be your funders. And you're engaging them in the planning process, the pre-implementation process, your implementation, your closeout, and even your dissemination. And at Cause Engagement, we definitely promote participatory approaches. So we definitely promote that shared decision making. And so if you're the community members that you're serving, they could actually be a part of the various different phases of your evaluation, planning through dissemination, through the lessons learned, sharing the lessons learned. It would be up to you. That's another webinar topic of how to include them. But then also as it relates to your funder, again, your funder can be involved in all of these stages, again, to make sure that there's number one, a good strong partnership, and again, you're being transparent, you're making changes as needed, and you're demonstrating that accountability as well. All right, so next we'll discuss quantitative and qualitative data collection methods, and we'll learn the difference between these methods and how to use them effectively in measuring and assessing our evaluation outcomes. All right. And so with qualitative data or qualitative methods, it's words, quantitative numbers. That's the key takeaway from this slide. And so with qualitative, you're focusing on words, stories, and detailed descriptions. You're exploring why and how behind behaviors and opinions. And qualitative data can be collected through interviews. You can have listening sessions, focus groups. You can have open-ended on your survey question. In addition to multiple choice or check all that, apply or ratings, you can also have your open-ended questions, and that provides your qualitative data. even through observations and just participating in meetings. And so if you know, and so if you're observing and participating in different things, you can have notes as well. And your qualitative methods or your qualitative data provides rich, in-depth insights into various experiences, and it takes a deeper dive. And then quantitative, so your numbers, right? So we're focusing on numbers and measurable facts. And so that usually comes out of your process evaluation. Your qualitative, I mean, you can still in the process have, satisfaction surveys, so you can still get qualitative data out of process, but it's more so, I would argue that it's more so in your outcome evaluation activities. um, so quantitative answers questions like how many or how much. And again, you can collect this through surveys. We talked about that. You can collect both qualitative and quantitative. With set choices, you can and your quantitative, you can have data counts. So for example, your registration sheet, there's a funder, I'm working with a client now, monthly there's a reporting requirement, and it's all quantitative. And so you have your data count. So you have your enrollment numbers, your participation, your outreach, your engagement, whatever those metrics are from that funder, those are your data counts. And quantitative data is easy to compare and analyze for trends and patterns. Okay. This came up, so quantifying qualitative data. This actually came up in a previous cohort with the group, and it was an evaluation cohort, and they said we actually do really, really good with qualitative data. We don't have enough quantitative data. And so the discussion became so the discussion evolved to like, so how do we quantify qualitative data? And so some steps or some suggestions that we came up with is, so you can code the data. And so let's say you have various testimonials, open-ended, or you have transcripts. You can start by categorizing your qualitative data. And so this is when we're looking for, and you can do this using software or manually, depending on how much qualitative data that you have. But basically, you're kind of counting if there are like consistent or prominent words or phrases that keep coming up. And so, and you can turn those into themes. And so, uh, or you can even, once you've coded it, you're counting how often that theme appears, right? So at this point, you can say, we had a survey of 100 individuals, and for this particular question, 50% of them, based off of that theme that you've identified from your coding, 50% of them said had a positive aspect on their environmental health, for example. You can, so this is us quantifying our qualitative data. And then you can assign numerical values to your responses. And so that means that you can also turn your qualitative responses into numerical data by creating some type of scoring system if you'd like. And then you also can use, as it relates to some of your free or low cost software options, you can use a word cloud. And with the word cloud feature, you can copy and paste your text, and it will give you counts of how often the words appear. And so that can assist you with your coding and helping you to identify what those themes are. Um, and there's also text analysis tools. So tools like word clouds can help visualize the most frequently mentioned words as well, or themes in your qualitative data. And then you can even combine your qualitative data and quantitative. So as I'm with the example that I provided earlier is, I think I said 100 100 surveys, and this open-ended question, 50%. And so that's you quantifying, right? You know that 50 out of 100 had this positive outlook on environmental health. but then you can marry those two. You can use the qualitative, those quotes or whatever that comment was, to complement the quantitative data that you were able to pull from those words. All right, so that's my short, quick tutorial on quantifying qualitative data. Right. Now, as it relates to data collection methods, there's basically two types of data that you have. You have pre-collected data, so you have existing data, and you have original data. So this is your new data that you're collecting on your own. And some of these, some of the for client files, for example, and for existing data, you could, of course, create opportunities to collect new data on client files as well. But for the purpose of this discussion, existing data examples include client files, medical records. You have any referral records if you have like referral partners, and then you have existing databases as well. So you have it could be within your own agency, or another agency may have something public, your county, so or your state, federal level. So you have uh, Environmental Protection Agency, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Hopefully, when everything gets back up, right, we'll still have access to those data sources. Census data. And there's actually, as it relates to census data, this could be used as so the existing data can be used as baseline data, or yeah, it could be used as baseline. When what I mean by that is, once you start implementing your program or your activities or your initiative, if you have existing information about the individuals that you're serving or your target population, depending on what your program activities are, there is an opportunity to be able to compare and say, so prior to our program, this is what was happening in this region, or in this area. These were the outcomes, or this is what this is what the status was. And then as a result of our program, we've implemented this. And over time, we've seen these changes. And you can look at published reports too. So your published reports can be, could be a university, it could be a funder, it could be a community partner, it could be someone else. You can always, again, that's kind of like your existing data. And then your original new data, this could be your attendance sheets, your login sheets. You can develop any surveys or questionnaires, and that includes any pre or post assessments, interviews, group interviews, individual interviews, focus groups or listening sessions, even visioning sessions. They're all a little different. They have slightly different meanings. Again, observations, and then even fidelity monitoring forms. So for example, let's say you develop a program or some type of curriculum with your program, should I say, or there's a lesson plan, and there's some type of facilitation or education that goes with that. There could be you could have a trainer or a colleague or someone internal from your organization actually observe and have a fidelity monitoring form. So fidelity is like your green light, yellow light, and red light. With the facilitator, green light, this is absolutely some changes that you can make to the program implementation or to the health education or that's being provided, without jeopardizing the fidelity of the program or the intent of our goals and outcomes. Yellow light is be careful, have a conversation about it. Just be very mindful of those changes because it could impact fidelity. And then your red light is definitely not. You cannot modify this activity you cannot modify this activity in any type of way because it will impact our fidelity. But that is an example of when I mentioned fidelity forms of how you can collect that new data to show, and this is more so on your process evaluation. This is what we've done. This is how we've ensured accountability and fidelity with our team, for example. So that's more so in your process. And those are a few data collection methods. Of course, there are more. And finally, we'll talk about planning and structuring an effective evaluation. And so your evaluation plan does not have to be 10 pages, 12 pages. It doesn't have to be very long. I would argue, and I've done this for clients, I would argue that your evaluation plan could be as short as 3 pages. And then I would even argue that at maximum, you could do 5 pages. So 3 to 5 pages. And I'll go to the next slide to give you an example. And so in our evaluation plan, we would have your evaluation logic model, which is not just used for evaluation planning, but also program planning and engagement. And so with your funders, this is a great tool to present to them, whether it's in your proposal or post award, to say, and this one page can really explain what your program is. So you have your logic model, and then I would say your data summary table, which I'll explain on the next page, and then an evaluation narrative. And so your narrative is just kind of explaining your program, your activities, and how you plan to implement your evaluation, or any key considerations that could not be included in the logic model or the data summary table. And I would argue that that's your simple evaluation plan. And so with this particular logic model, there's different formats that you can use. And I actually use, as it relates to the text, the formatting, I used bullets and paragraphs intentionally, just to show you all that there's not one rule on how you develop your logic model, excuse me. But in general, your logic model, the outline would be your inputs. So that's what you're investing. You have your outputs, and so that's what you do and how you do it, and that's your participation in your activities. And so that's your process evaluation, is your outputs. And then you have SMARTY outcomes, and your impact evaluation, which I kind of merged. But when I say SMARTY, so some of you all are familiar with SMART objectives and goals. So SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-based. And so the IE is inclusive and inclusive and equitable. So that's where the SMARTY came under the leadership of, I first saw it with a CDC proposal. And so with your outcomes, you can break them down in incremental events or changes that occur as a result of your outputs, as a result of the activities or the things that you're doing. So with your outcomes, you have short-term outcomes. And maybe for the purpose of the grant with your corporate foundation, maybe that's all you're reporting on is your short-term outcomes. But that doesn't mean that you don't have the expectation or the plan for your medium-term and your long-term outcome, or your intermediate or long-term outcomes, or even just your long-term impact. Because again, you're building a relationship with your funder, and you're showing them, even after the funding period or the initial funding period, what they're investing in, and is helping them to communicate what their potential social impact is with their stakeholders. And it creates an opportunity for future funding, or even an increase in funding. So I would still argue, even with your corporate funder, even if you're only reporting on short term, that you still develop your medium term or your intermediate and your long-term goals. And so for this particular program, I'll explain it. As I mentioned, you should be able to explain your program with your logic model. And so what you invest are time, materials for this particular particular example: time, materials, technology. We have marketing, PR. We have a program team. We have associate consultants, and any additional partnerships and relationships. And you can list those, like who they are, in there. This is just very generic. And for this particular program, what they're doing is they're hosting parent workshops, parent engagement events, they're distributing early childhood development kits, and they're training pediatricians. And what they are planning to do is to have 15 parent workshops, 15 parent engagement events. They want to distribute 500 toolkits, and they want to train 100 pediatricians. And as a result of that, within the first 6 months, 75% of parents and caregivers will have an increase of knowledge of responsive caregiving practices, um, and the importance of early brain development as measured by pre and post workshop surveys. I kind of just threw that in there, but it's okay to have bullets. You can have a bullet to say, um, within 6 months, 75% increase of knowledge. That's, that's simple. You can keep it as simple as that as well. And then we move on to intermediate and long-term outcomes. All right. And then as it relates to, I'm skipping over. So the last column as it relates to impact. So I included long-term and impact. I combined them for this example, but impact, an example would be increased rates of healthy development in children age 0 to 3, particularly among vulnerable populations. And this will lead to improved school readiness and long-term health outcomes for the entire community. Again, that's that vision statement, right? And that doesn't mean that it's realistic for you to, or your team, your internal or external evaluation team, or even your funder to necessarily measure that. However, in your outcomes, in your questions, whether it's a survey or whether it's an interview, you can, or even post implementation, you can still gather stories to complement or to show promise or progress towards what that big vision or what that big impact goal is. All right, so you have your logic model, and then usually on logic models, I didn't have enough room on this screen. Sometimes you have assumptions, and so your assumption is that, for example, that pediatricians are available and interested in being trained. And you're also assuming that parents are also interested and available to engage in these various workshops. You're assuming that you have funding. You're assuming, you're making these different assumptions, but then you have kind of like external factors that could possibly impact your work, such as loss of funding, or it could be a natural disaster, or it could be the political climate and change in policy or something. And so usually there's like a little small table at the bottom that talks about those assumptions and external factors that you can put into your document. And this could be a simple Word document, it could be a PowerPoint slide or a Google slide that you create your logic model in. And there are a number of examples online as well. Okay, and so in your evaluation planning, you have your logic model, and then you have your data summary table. So your data summary table, it could be, you can have multiple rows because you might have more than one evaluation question. Some folks, like I would recommend maybe like 3 overarching evaluation questions, for example. So you have your evaluation question, and then there's information needed to answer that question. So you're documenting on this spreadsheet what information is needed to answer this question. And then information sources, who has this information? And then your data collection strategies for how you're going to collect this. So how are we going to get this information? Are we doing a document review? Are we looking at records? Are we observing? Are we going to do surveys? Are we going to do pre and post assessments? Are we doing interviews, listening sessions, focus groups? Like, how are we going to collect this information? And then just because someone has the information, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily responsible for like having a responsibility in the data collection. So this is like just also determining clear roles and responsibilities within your team and being able to communicate this to with your funder as well. So your procedures for gathering information, who is actually going to gather this information? Is it the again, if it's, let's say it's an education project or awareness, is it the person is it the facilitator or the educator? Is it the evaluator? Is it the admin staff? Is it the program manager? Like, who is responsible for gathering this information? And who are you gathering the information from? And when? Is it immediately after the education session? Is it within 3 months? Or for example, if you're doing follow-up, like a post follow-up, like a 3-month, 6-month follow-up, like just the when. So this is your plan. And then you have your data analysis procedures. So are you going to use qualitative? quantitative? Are you going to compare? So it's very simple. And so this is, again, this is your data summary table. So in your evaluation plan, you have your logic model, you have your data summary table, and this is something that could be done as a team effort. It could be done with your external evaluation team, but if you don't have the budget for that, again, it would be internal or a designated, person. And again, you just have to be realistic, and you want to be realistic about your capacity and capability within your organization. So you don't want to overcommit certain things, but then also, again, you want to be very clear and have those clear expectations as it relates to what the funder expects as well. And so that's your data summary table. And again, a narrative explaining that. And like I said, I would like to argue that your actual evaluation plan could be 3 to 5 pages. And one of the things that you don't want to do is, I hope I've communicated this message clearly. So you don't want to wait to the end to start your evaluation planning, if possible. And if you have already started implementing, or you're at the end and you have to figure these things out, you can still start from square one as it relates to the planning to help you to figure out where to access this information or how you're going to do it, even if you're starting not at the beginning of your program planning or at the beginning of your evaluation planning. All right. And so what I just attempted to do was to explain to you Cause Engagement Associates monitoring and evaluation framework, where we develop our evaluation goals and questions. We have our process evaluation. We conduct our monitoring and evaluation activities. We're collecting data. We're analyzing it, and then we interpret and report. We didn't talk about that. That's more so your dissemination and with dissemination, of course, you're sharing your lessons learned, and that's a plan in itself. And then we're focusing, and the reason why we're doing this is we're focusing and we're determining our next steps for long-term impact, and we want to show that long-term impact and our plans for sustainability.
Thank you for participating in our webinar. Please stay in contact with us at info@causeengagement.com or visit our website at causeengagement.com.